Hello, everyone. Welcome to this morning's panel on building a modern, sustainable infrastructure. I think it's fair to say that Infrastructure Week has finally arrived. My name is Patty Sleece-Doyle, and I will be moderating today's discussion. While I'm currently a partner at the Brunswick Group, which is a strategic advisory firm, I also serve as a political commentator on CNN. And I've had the pleasure of having a 30-year career in politics and government, including 16 years working for Hillary Clinton, both in the White House and on her campaigns. And I had the very, very distinct honor of managing Joe Biden's 2008 vice presidential operations. I'm pleased to be here today virtually with this incredible panel, and I'd like to take a moment to introduce all of them before we get started. They are Bob Blue, Executive VP and Co-Chief Operating Officer of Dominion Energy; Doug Parks, Executive Vice President for Global Product Development and Purchasing and Supply Chain of General Motors; Congresswoman Haley Stevens, representing Michigan's 11th Congressional District; and Steph Fellman, Policy Director for the Biden-Harris campaign, and before that, a Senior Policy Advisor to Vice President Biden at the White House. Bob will discuss what Dominion Energy is doing to produce clean energy and the steps we can take to make our power grids more sustainable. Doug will talk about GM's historic investment in electric vehicles that rely on that grid, and together they can demonstrate that sustainability is good for business. Before joining Congress, Haley served on President Obama's Auto Task Force, helping manage federal support for the turnaround at GM and Chrysler that helped save millions of automaker and auto supplier jobs. She'll talk about the importance of modern, sustainable infrastructure to American manufacturing and America's economic competitiveness. Together, these three panelists demonstrate how important it is for the next administration and the next Congress to work closely with business, stakeholders, and state and local governments. And last, but certainly not least, Steph will outline the Biden-Harris clean energy agenda, but she's really here to listen and answer any questions. Vice President Biden made it clear that Washington cannot solve the climate crisis on its own. They'll need to work closely with leaders like Bob and Doug and Haley and all of you listening in. For my part, I'm going to ask a few questions on what all of this investment can mean for environmental and economic justice. But before we get started, I need to cover a few logistical items. You all can participate by emailing your question to us at info@businessforward.org. And I will read it aloud during the Q&A. Please include the name of your business and where you live in your message. Again, that's info@businessfwd.org. Please note this call is on the record and there may be reporters present. I'd also like to thank, before we get started, our host committee sponsors, Bank of America, Dominion Energy, General Motors, and our panelists today for making this panel possible. Before we dive into our discussion, I'd like to have our panelists give a little background on themselves, their organizations, and how their organization is leading the push for sustainable infrastructure. Bob, could you please start us off?
Sure, thanks, Patty. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast, and good morning, I guess, to folks in different time zones. I'd like to start by thanking the host committee and Business Forward for sponsoring this panel and giving me an opportunity to represent Dominion Energy. Just a quick description of Dominion Energy for those of you all who may not be familiar with us. We're about 20,000 employees who provide energy in the form of electricity and natural gas to more than 7 million customers. We're headquartered here in Richmond, Virginia, and we operate in 20 states. And we have a vision. We're particularly pleased to be able to be on this panel because we have a vision for a clean energy future. And there's some principles that underlie that. The first one is reliability. We understand the importance of keeping the lights on and the gas flowing 24/7, 365. And I think just in recent weeks, we've seen what can happen when that's disrupted, whether it's Hurricane Isaias in the mid-Atlantic or the derecho in the Midwest, or rolling brownouts in California due to really high heat and lack of infrastructure there. So we understand that that is critically important. And at the same time, we understand value for our customers is critically important. And again, recent months have highlighted the importance of keeping energy costs low as the economic effects of the pandemic have taken hold. And we decided back in March to suspend disconnections of electricity and natural gas for non-payment because we thought it was the right thing to do for our customers. But building on all of that is part of our vision for sustainable energy future. And let me talk about 3 initiatives that we're focused on that I think fit well with this panel. The first is a dramatic expansion of solar and wind energy. The scale of what we do in our business is pretty substantial. Sometimes we start smaller. So we have a project, the first offshore wind turbines in federal waters of the United States. We constructed and finished earlier this summer. They'll start generating electricity later this year. It's a small step, although when you look at a 620-foot wind turbine rising up out of the ocean, it doesn't look small, but it's the first step in what will be a much larger project, 2,600 megawatts of wind from offshore by 2026 for us. That's 180 turbines. You can imagine the amount of labor and materials that are going to go into that. These turbines are going to be more than 800 feet tall, so even larger than the ones that we've already done. It's the largest infrastructure project in our company's history by, I believe, a substantial amount. At the same time, we're quickly ramping up our solar energy production. The Virginia General Assembly passed probably the most aggressive solar mandate in the country earlier this year. And through that, in keeping with that, we'll build or purchase the output from 16,000 megawatts of solar energy by 2035. And again, to give you a sense of scale, that's 160,000 acres of solar panels that we're talking about constructing as part of that. So big projects, big scale, lots of effort involved in that. As we think about that, another initiative that we're thinking about is transportation electrification. And you're going to hear a lot more about that from Doug in just a minute. But one area that we focused on particularly is school buses. You know, in a normal year, kids would be headed back to school right now, many of them on diesel buses. We believe that we can work to electrify school buses in a way that improves emissions from the buses and improves the air inside the buses. And also gives us an opportunity to use these buses essentially as rolling mobile batteries, what's called vehicle-to-grid technology, a real opportunity to try to advance energy storage, which is incredibly important when we're talking about more wind and solar, because those sources only generate electricity when the wind is blowing and this is a very innovative way to do this. That we're starting, again, small, about 50 buses this year, but we would hope to expand it. And then finally, turning to the gas side of our business, we're partnering with agricultural producers, pork producers, dairy producers, to take the biogas that is emitted from the waste at pig farms and dairy farms and turn it into natural gas that people can use in their homes and businesses. It's carbon negative. The partnerships we've announced so far will reduce carbon by the equivalent of taking 650,000 cars off the road. Again, all of these things are where we can scale up to much more substantial efforts, and we're underway in all of them, but very much looking forward to a cleaner energy future and the discussion on this panel. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Bob. That was great. And now we're going to turn it over to Doug. Doug, can you tell us a little bit about your work at GM?
Yeah, sure, Patty, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about it. I guess I'd start out with the vision we have at GM. We call it 000, and it stands for zero crashes, zero emissions, and zero congestion. So we see the future as a 000 future, and we try to do all of our planning and our execution to enable that future. So obviously a very key transition to that future is EVs. And we do believe that the future is all EVs. Our company is moving to an all EV future. Even through the pandemic, while we were conserving cash in a lot of other ways, we kept full acceleration, so to speak, not full throttle, but full acceleration on all of our EV programs. And actually, we're predicting by mid-decade that we'll sell over 1 million EV vehicles globally. So we think the EV trend is coming. We think it's coming fast, and GM absolutely wants to lead it. As a little bit of background, some of you may remember that General Motors created an electric vehicle called the EV1 quite a while ago. And although we learned a lot from it, commercially it wasn't quite viable. So then we started with a Chevrolet Bolt, or a Chevrolet Volt Generation 1, a Generation 2 Volt. I was personally involved in those. And now we have a Chevrolet Bolt. And so we've learned a lot about electric vehicle customers' needs and roadblocks and enablers to cause this future to go forward. And we've turned all those into a new approach, which I'll refer to in a minute, we call Ultium. It's a totally new way to design batteries and vehicle architectures to enable EVs across a broad range of segments. And we're really excited about it. So in this past, we spent a lot of money on development and infrastructure, and that helped us learn a lot. But just for reference, over the next 5 years, General Motors will spend over $20 billion in engineering, development, and capital to enable this future. So it's very serious to us. It's a very serious business, and we need everybody kind of pulling in the same direction, and we hope that that'll happen. To enable people to drive these vehicles, they need, of course, charge them. So we have to work with partners, both utility partners, charge networks. We have to create easy charging for all our customers. They need to be able to charge at home, which is kind of a new thing. Most people gas up at the gas station. You'll be able to fuel up at home. You need. It's terrific if you can fuel up at work, and also then on the go. And when you're on the go, it's more of a fast charging kind of approach. So we need partnerships. We need support there, and or hopefully we'll have some of that dialogue. Just a few key things about our Ultium EV architecture. When you design a vehicle around the battery, it's a new approach for an architecture. And when you do it right, which we believe we have in Ultium, you create products off of that architecture for cars, SUVs, CUVs, and trucks. And so what you don't do is take the existing car and fit technology to it. You optimize the technology and develop products around it. And in that way, you can get scale. You can work on cost, you can get volume, which means affordability for our customers. So that's really the way forward. People want to have the same total cost or perhaps lower with an EV. They don't want to have to pay more. And we believe we've actually accomplished that with our Ultium architecture and our new vehicles that'll be coming out. Just some key benefits of this is you're going to see vehicles with over 400 miles of range. You're going to see 0 to 60 times in as low as 3 seconds. So very brisk accelerations. We'll have front wheel drive, we'll have rear wheel drive, we'll have all wheel drive products. And you'll be able to charge them from a nearly depleted state to a fully charged state in 20 to 30 minutes. So this is some of the new technology that we have coming. We think it's really an enabler going forward. We'll be building these products in factories in the United States. We build the Bolt today in Michigan. We're going to build the all-new Hummer EV, which we've announced, in Michigan. And we're going to build batteries in Ohio. We have a groundbreaking that's underway on a new battery plant in Ohio. So we're very excited about that. We also are building autonomous vehicles. We believe all AVs should be EVs. We think it's right for emissions. We think it's right for cities. And we think it's the right way to go forward on AVs. I look forward to talking about that a little bit later if possible. And then also GM has announced recently a venture with EVgo, where we're going to triple the size of fast chargers available for customers in the United States by deploying 2,700 new fast chargers. Those are the ones that charge in 30 minutes, not 3 or 4 hours. And then internally inside the company, we're deploying over 3,500 new chargers inside our own facilities for our own employees to use and to help migrate, trying to lead by example there. So I will tell you also that from a renewability standpoint, we plan to have all of our electricity needs met by 2030, 100% on renewables. And we think we'll be halfway there by 2023. So we're very excited about the future. We're committed to a 000 future, and future's now. So I look forward to talking about it more later.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Doug. Now I want to turn it over to Congresswoman Haley Stevens from Michigan. You're there. I thought I lost you there, but you're there. You worked on these issues, Congresswoman, in the Obama administration and in Congress. Could you tell us a little bit about what sustainable infrastructure could mean for America's economic competitiveness in general, and then for manufacturing in particular?
Absolutely. And by the way, Patty, it's an honor to be on this panel with both Bob and Doug, our industry partners and leaders in their own right in the respective field, being brought together by none other than our friends at Business Forward. You all do such a great job of forging these collaborations, the ability for us to have these dialogues in places like where I represent, which is in southeastern Michigan, the suburbs of Detroit, as all the way up to the nation's capital and into a new Biden administration, where we're really going to be able to reap some of the benefits of the policymaking and the leadership that we've seen, frankly, our partners in industry step up to while we've been waiting on an executive office to really meet the charge. So first and foremost, Patty, I'm in the party of the infrastructure guarantee, that every single person, every resident should have access to safe and maintained roadways and bridges, clean air to breathe, fresh water to drink. That's just the basics. And we're actually still working on realizing that goal. You're seeing residents in the city of Detroit run households without fresh drinking water. We're seeing terrible roadway problems all throughout the Midwest. In my district alone here in Michigan, I conducted an analysis, and out of the hundreds of billions of dollars of build grant funding that's supposed to come into our state, not a penny has come into my district. And yet I am a headquarters operation, not only for our automakers, but our auto supply chain. And as we start to think about the opportunity of our supply chain, complex systems that employ a lot of people, incredible jobs in the advanced manufacturing sector, it's going to relate to these infrastructure goals that we have and infrastructure needs. Bob did a very nice job of lining up and outlining the goals that his company has. And we applaud that. That's real leadership. We have got to be able to meet Bob and others where they're at. And that's got to be co-investment. It's got to come from the local level. This is why it's so smart that you have a member of Congress in this panel, because we have our fingers on the pulse of our district. And you're absolutely right, Patty. We're looking at competitiveness. You look at the infrastructure guarantee, the basics. Well, that's so we can do the innovations. As Doug lined up the goals that General Motors has and all throughout our automotive industry to become electric car companies to sell to the world, those innovations and those technologies are coming from a place called Michigan. They're coming from our engineering base. They're coming from our skilled workforce. And yet we need a federal government that helps us set the table, that helps us, in the old days, we'd say, plow the field or, even pave the roadway. But it's more than that. This is about a competitive innovation agenda. And you can look at the dollars that we have put forward right now for an infrastructure package. Obviously, the House passed theirs. The Senate doesn't look like it's too much in a hurry to pick it up and pass anything with the Senate anytime soon in terms of an infrastructure bill. But yet I believe that if we do this smart, if we tie it into R&D, if we tie it into the, almost 3/4 of the R&D spends that are coming through on autonomous vehicles or electric vehicles right through Michigan, then we're going to be in a place not only to build, and as Joe Biden likes to say, build back better, we're going to be able to sell to the world and continue to lead through our innovation capacity. That's been our story over the last 20 years. If you really look at it, yeah, we've been in some choppy waters. Yes, we've gone through some hard times. I want to have equal opportunity. I want to have everybody who has access to a good paying job. And we're going to do it because we're making smart, strategic, collaborative, co-investments that give our taxpayers a return on spend, bring together our public-private partnerships, and allow us to continue to make the products that everyone is going to buy. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation and everything we're going to cover today. Thank you all.
Sorry, I was on mute. All right, Haley, thank you so much for your excitement, and that was fantastic. Finally, I want to turn it over to our final panelist, Steph Feldman. Steph, could you tell us a little bit about what the campaign is doing in terms of building a modern, sustainable infrastructure, and if you have any response to what any of our panelists have said thus far?
Thanks so much, Patty, for the opportunity to be a part of this. And thank you to my fellow panelists. I'm really enjoying the opportunity to hear what your companies are doing. Congresswoman, it is always so valuable to hear what you're learning on the ground and also through your work representing your constituents on the Hill. So this is just such a wonderful opportunity. My name is Steph Feldman. I am the policy director for Vice President Biden. I've worked for him for about 10 years now. And if he is elected and takes office in January, he will be taking over during a moment where there are three crises that are worsened by President Trump: a public health crisis worsened by his failure to act, an economic crisis worsened by his failure to get the virus under control, and a racial justice crisis that is fanned by his words of hate. That is quite a challenge that President Biden will have to take on. And that's on top of the ongoing crises that President Trump has ignored and flat out denied, including the climate crisis. Well, Donald Trump has no plan, but Vice President Biden does have a plan. His plan to pull us out of this economic crisis is his Build Back Better plan. It's about building us back, creating jobs, growing our economy, not just to build us back to the way things were before the virus or before President Trump took office, but to a new vision of a better America in which we are tackling big challenges like the climate crisis. So a core tenet of the Build Back Better plan is an agenda to take on the climate crisis. It is a $2 trillion investment in infrastructure and clean energy. It is accelerated over 4 years. If you hear a lot of policy budget discussions, probably over 10-year windows. This is a 4-year investment. And the reason is that we are accelerating investments to grow our economy and recognize the need for urgent action now to create jobs and pull us out of this recession. So the $2 trillion is a combination of fiscal investments. That's investments in things like electric vehicle charging stations, retrofitting buildings, yes, investing in solar and wind, investing in high-speed rail and a better electric grid. It's also research investments, investing in future technology like better battery storage, like Congressman Stevens said. So we're not just developing the future technologies, but we are also exporting them to the rest of the world and will be the world's leader in clean energy innovation. And it includes standards, like a standard to achieve carbon-free electricity by 2035. I don't want to talk for too long because I'm mostly here to hear our excellent panelists and engage in conversation, but let me just say that there are two things about this plan that make me so excited. The first is that Vice President Biden has positioned his infrastructure and clean energy investment as core to his economic recovery package. That means that this isn't just something that is on his list of things he'd like to achieve one day, but it's fundamental to getting things right at the beginning of his administration. The good news is he actually has a record of doing this too. We're in maybe month 40 or beyond of a Trump administration and still no infrastructure bill passed by Congress under President Trump's leadership. Well, as you probably remember, President Obama and Vice President Biden passed a big infrastructure package within the first month of their administration. That was the Recovery Act. And Vice President Biden played a key role in going up to the Hill, getting those final 3 Republican votes needed to get that done. And he will do it again as president and make these investments right up front. Second, the vice president's plan is designed to lock in progress during the first 4 years of his administration. So we are set on a path to have a strong economy and build an economy that will achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. Why does this matter? Let's think a little bit about the transition from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. President Trump was able to undo a lot of the regulations and environmental standards that President Obama put in place. Those standards that were supposed to keep our air clean, our water clean, President Trump was unable to undo those. But things he wasn't able to undo, he wasn't able to pull out those wind turbines. He wasn't able to undo the improvements we made to the electric grid in 2009 and 2010. My colleagues on the panel here know that well. So there are big infrastructure investments that President Biden will make at the beginning of this administration. So we will be on an irreversible path toward a clean energy economy by the end of his first term. So no future president can undo that again. So that's why I'm so excited to be working for Vice President Biden to get him elected in the next 77 days. And I will leave it there so I can enjoy the rest of the panel.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Steph. There's a lot of excitement on this panel. I want to thank all the panelists for their opening remarks. Now we're going to get into the Q&A portion. Before I kick off, again, for anyone listening, if you want to submit a question, you can email at info@businessforward.org. I always like the Q&A portion on these panels better than remarks, no offense to my panelists, but so we want to make it more of a conversation than me asking you a question. So I will address it to one of you, but if you want to jump in, please feel free to jump in. And we want to make this, again, like I said, a conversation. I'm going to start with Congresswoman Stevens, but it really is appropriate for all of you. It's how can the government support the adoption of electric vehicles? Congresswoman?
Yeah, and this is going to be an important one to hear from my colleague, John. And I pinch myself because it's a question that I've been asking my colleagues, myself, people who I've had the privilege of working with in the private sector and municipal government for a very long time. One, we recognize that we're absolutely at an inflection point, that there are global markets driving the production of electric vehicles faster than our own markets. But one of the things that I look at as it pertains to this conversation is the supply chain. In my district, here in the suburbs of Detroit, in Northville, Michigan, there's an electrolytes manufacturer. They provide the chemicals that go into the lithium-ion battery. This is a lean company, just about 30 people who work there. They ship in big steel tubs these chemicals that go into the lithium-ion battery that goes into the electric car, and yet they are the only manufacturer of this chemical process in Michigan, and they are one of two in the United States of America. So when I think about Joe Biden's vision for building back better and making the needed investments and forging the needed partnerships in order to get this done, we have got to be focused on our supply chain. We have got to make the United States and continue to hone in on the United States being an attractive place for these types of companies to grow, to start up, to proliferate, and to mature. And so what I'd really like to see us do is adopt a supply chain that enables us to make a complete electric car. We've done a lot of this on batteries. It's great. We have the supply chain, but we want to have a robust supply chain that's employing American workers. The rest of this, as it relates to the municipalities and consumer preferences and this and that, that will come. That will come. That will be there. The demand will be there. And this is really also, Doug, where I'd love to bring you in, because I'm sure you have also thought about this conversation. I don't want to step on your toes, but I'm all about the diversification and strengthening of our supply chain to, help make sure we can get this done.
Congresswoman Stevens, I agree with you completely. Matter of fact, we're really proud of our investment in our joint venture with LG, and LG happens to be a global company with a lot of this technology that you talk about that isn't all here in the United States. So we're very proud that we're going to be fabricating, creating, making battery cells in the Midwest. We're doing it at a large facility in Lordstown, Ohio. And then those battery cells are going to be shipped to our Detroit Hamtramck plant, or what we call Factory Zero, here in Michigan. And we're going to build those into Hummer EVs and other products. And one of the key reasons why we wanted to make our own batteries is because that supply chain you talked about. We've got to get the technology developed. We got to get it developed locally. We need a lot of development and technology out of our supply base here in the US. And it's no secret that China is also pushing forward in this same area. So we've got to get this technology and develop our supply base here in the United States. So I would completely agree. If you wouldn't mind, I'd like to add, there's a couple other things that perhaps others could do to help EV adoption. And probably the first one is what I would call consumer incentives, not company incentives. GM doesn't want incentives to make EVs. What we want is we'd like help, if possible, with customers and the affordability of EVs. So there is a tax credit that's out there. As you know, one of the leaders in EVs, we've kind of sold our supply of them. So, you know, we would certainly encourage thinking about increasing those incentives as early adopters come into this space to improve affordability for customers to pick up EVs, because there's a lot to learn about an EV. A lot of people think about the monthly cost from their dealer, but what they don't always think about is the operating cost, which is frankly quite a bit less than purchasing gasoline. So we've got to educate and bring people together on what that total cost is. And then the other thing we talked a bit about is infrastructure. As I mentioned, GM partnered with EVgo to install, to triple the nation's capacity for fast chargers. These are the ones when you're driving around and you didn't plan on it, but you got to get some energy, you can get a fast charge in 20 or 30 minutes. So that's great, but we need even more. To make EVs mainstream, we need a lot of charging capability at work, at home, at our homes. I have one here in my garage, as you would probably imagine. And then when you're out and about and on the go. So anything we can do to help the infrastructure along and help, you know, co-fund between business and government, I think that would be terrific.
And if we heard you right, you're making in Michigan.
Yes, absolutely. And
which we love.
I'm sitting here in Milford, Michigan, which just may be one of your districts. So
yes,
I do want to thank you.
You're at the proving grounds.
Yes, exactly. So I want to thank you for all your support in this space. I think it's critical that we work together. So thank you. World-class
facility over there.
Well, if I could just jump in and say, I think that this proves the point that Michigan workers and U.S. auto companies just need a partner in the White House in order to execute on their plans and their capacity to build these vehicles. And that's exactly what they would get with a President Biden in office. This is maybe one of his favorite topics, actually, electric vehicles. The vice president loves talking about electric vehicles. And why? Because there's so much potential for the United States to own the electric vehicle market, which would be a total game changer. We just need to do a few things to put that in place. So the vice president has a comprehensive plan here, and it would actually create 1 million jobs across the auto sector and across the auto supply chain. A lot of those jobs we expect would be in Michigan. And those are, the steps would be including using the power of federal procurement to increase demand for American-made, American-sourced clean vehicles. So that will essentially create a clear and stable source of demand, which will allow our auto suppliers to meet that demand and to plan ahead. Encouraging, as Doug was talking about, creating some sort of consumer rebate so consumers can swap old, less efficient vehicles for newer American vehicles built from materials and parts sourced in the United States. Third, making major public infrastructure investments. The vice president's plan is 500,000 electric vehicle charging stations for exactly the reason Doug mentioned, which is that a lot of people now might be intrigued by having electric vehicles, but are worried about the practicality of how do I get from point A to point B and where I need to go every day. But imagine a network of 500,000 charging stations across the country that would allow you to go where you need to go. That's within the realm of possibility, and that's the vice president's plan. And then fourth, accelerating research on battery technology and supporting the development of domestic production capabilities in order to develop our domestic supply chain, which goes right back to what Congressman Stevens was talking about. So that's the Biden plan.
Terrific. Thank you all. We're going to switch from EVs to AVs. And Doug, this is to you. But again, anybody can jump in. The question is there has been a lot of excitement around the development of self-driving vehicles. I'm excited about it. But we still haven't seen deployments at scale. What are the barriers to introducing this potentially life-saving technology into the marketplace?
So I think the primary barrier is doing this safely and breaking through on the technology. And let me return to it before I forget this other thought. Another, I think, enabler is electric vehicles. As I'd said earlier, we believe all AVs should be EVs. We think AVs work really well in the big cities where there's a lot of people. We think you can help improve congestion and you can help improve emissions in those cities by autonomous EV vehicles. But primarily, I think the question you asked, Patty, is what needs to occur to make these vehicles happen. There is a lot of development going on. General Motors has a technology called Super Cruise that we have. We're bringing out in our new vehicles. It's terrific. It's on the highway. The car drives by itself completely, but it needs a driver there, a supervisor, if you will, because there's always some complexities that happen. So true, fully autonomous AVs can't afford any of that. So the technology development is, it's a race. A number of companies are involved. General Motors is a majority owner of a company called Cruise, who's leading the software development. We've announced a self-driving Cruise Origin that will be built in that Detroit Hamtramck plant that I referred to here in Michigan. And so we know how to build the vehicle. What we have to break through on is the technology. It's not okay to handle 100% of the incidences on the road most of the time. It's not even okay to do it 95% of the time. You have to do it flawlessly. So you have to have backup systems. You have to have a completely validated software stack. And that's what's so difficult about it. That's why we're doing a lot of our development in the city of San Francisco. As all of you have been in big cities, there's unimaginable situations with double parked cars and people moving materials in and out of storefronts and 6 and 7 lane intersections. That's where the technology has to push through. So it has to be done in a safe way. So we have our own set of internal metrics. We're working with the federal government on how we're going to validate the technology. I think so we've got to prove that it's safe. It's kind of a short answer to your question. The opportunity is fantastic, though. I believe the data is 94% of all accidents are due to human decisions, whether we're distracted or on our phones or what other worse behavior. That can theoretically all be eliminated because I've been in these cars. I've ridden in them. They have 40 different sensors between cameras and radars and a thing we call LiDAR. They don't get distracted. They don't get sleepy. They don't get tired. So once we validate the technology and perfect it, I think there's a huge upside in safety, which is kind of our primary reason why we're pushing on the technology. So a lot of work going on. It needs to be deployed safely is my answer.
Terrific. Thank you so much. Okay, Bob, I'm going to bring you in now. We're shifting to a just transition, helping coal workers and communities. So the question comes from Pam Fent from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Yay, Wisconsin. Here's a question. How do we make sure there is a truly just transition where workers in legacy energy are not harmed and new jobs have good wages, benefits, training, safety, and union protections?
Yeah, I think that's critical. I talked a lot about our expansion into wind and solar. That is a transition that we have been making away from generating electricity using coal. And that transition seems likely to continue. But the people who worked in those coal stations, and we have closed some and have announced we're going to close others. Every time you turn on a light switch, you should be thanking the folks who work in those facilities because it's not an easy job. They work incredibly hard. They're incredibly dedicated to our customers. And so far, when we have had to transition, close a coal station, we've been able to do a pretty good job of offering other opportunities within our company. And now as we think about the technology going forward, we need to be thinking as a company, how do we train people who have been working in one part of our industry to be able to work in another part of our industry. Obviously, the skills are going to be very different to be a solar technician than they are to work in a fossil plant. So it's incumbent upon us in industry to be thinking about that. It's incumbent upon us to work with our partners in government on training programs that will help people transition to these new jobs, because we're not obviously talking about a lack of effort or ambition. We just need to make sure that people have the right skills, and we owe it to them because we've all benefited. Every single one of us who's listening to this has benefited from those stations and the folks who did all the work to help power them. And we need to remember that. So I think it requires a real focused effort, both on the part of industry and government. One that we're certainly looking forward to as we transition, but an incredibly important one. And I don't want to underestimate the challenges associated with it.
No. You guys just make it so easy, make it look so easy. All you do is flip on the light switch and, and it's not. And I think as we look at the type of leader that we have in Joe Biden, somebody who has perspective, who is understanding, who values hard work and wants to continue to value hard work. We also know that, and this is something that we navigate all the time in the United States Congress, right? Which is that this is not a blank slate. This is a built environment that we are navigating, that we are renovating, that in some ways we are rehabbing. And that's a lot more difficult than just doing the work from the bottom up, which is why it is so important for us to take the collaborative approach rather than the finger pointing approach. And so thank you for helping be a part of that, Bob. It's a big testament that you're here today having this dialogue and also showcasing what your workforce is made of and what your vision is for the future.
Yeah, the Congress couldn't be more right about the vice president and really recognizing the value of these workers. And I think the other thing that the vice president really focuses on is in many communities that are focused on coal mining or a power plant, that's the culture of the community, and that's what makes the community run. So we need to make sure that we're investing not just in the workers, but also in the communities as a whole. That means repairing infrastructure where it's been depleted or where the tax base has been depleted, making sure that they have access to public schools, community college, higher education for their children and themselves, and recognizing that it is a cultural aspect and we need to respect and honor the work that they've been doing. The vice president has a bunch of plans in order to make sure that communities that have been affected by the transitions in our energy sector are able to access the federal resources they deserve. One of those, I'll just talk about one of those to talk quickly, but one of those is creating essentially a White House strike force, which would be a team of agency leads that would be in the White House, and they would then go into communities that are experiencing an economic transition and help that agency or help that community identify, we need grants to do X, Y, Z in our community, help us get them. And those communities need experts so they can tap into those resources.
Terrific, thank you all. We're gonna shift topics again. And this question comes from Nancy Becker in Lisle, Illinois. And Haley, I'm gonna toss it to you. The question is, presidents have talked about improving our infrastructure for years, and we still have bridges, roads, and rails all in disrepair and outdated. We need high-speed trains across the country, sustainable road components, and rethink systems and their environmental impacts on cities and towns. How can we combine clean energy and sustainable goals to help us improve upon these items?
Yay, Nancy. Thank you for the question of the day. How are we going to get this done in terms of our infrastructure agenda? And look, I think it's important to look at recent history. As 2008 hit and we had a major recession, we were saving our economy from utter ruin, which is why we had to make investments to stabilize various segments of our economy, including our auto industry. And we also did support various infrastructure needs, but we just didn't go far enough. And look, we've got to be honest about the price tag of initiatives like these that Nancy's lining out and what that means for taxpayers, which is an incredible return on the taxpayer dollar. We see a lot of inequality throughout our country. Infrastructure is the great equalizer, ushering in the technologies and the innovations and the capacity to really lead is within our grasp if we do the infrastructure agenda properly. And that means tying in clean energy, because we're paying for it. We're paying right now for not having clean energy initiatives as part of our infrastructure agenda. We're paying, as Nancy so nicely stated, we're paying because we haven't done the general maintenance and the repair, and we're seeing the total lack of return on this. And what I want to see is, people like Doug and the workers of General Motors get to work safely, realize, hey, we're putting the world on wheels. We deserve to drive on the best roads, and that we need to have the best materials, and that we need to tie this together with a clean energy future. The goals that are being realized, particularly in terms of fossil fuels and diversified energy bases, is going to be a real benefit and boon to us. So one, we're going to have a vision with Joe Biden. He's already laid it out on the campaign trail. I think he's going to get into office, and he's going to have the understanding, which is so needed right now for us, the understanding of how to pass a big package like this and how to bring everyone to the table. So we are on the precipice of something really exciting. This is a new American moment, and this is a chance to get it done for the American people.
Patty, one thing I might add is that there should be a rigorous and understandable process for siting infrastructure. I mean, in addition to investment, if we're going to expand the clean energy economy, that is going to require investment in the grid, investment in electric transmission, those kinds of things. And if we don't have an understandable process for siting those kinds of projects that have a beginning and an end, then I think it gets very challenging. So in addition to invest, and it should be rigorous, no question about that, but one that we understand the rules and can follow them and can accomplish these projects that are so needed.
Terrific, great point, thank you. Okay, we have the next question. Steph, I think it's to you. It's from Susan Smith from Salem, Oregon. And the question is the Biden plan for climate change consistent with the equitable and just climate action platform agreed upon by environmental justice and environmental advocates last summer?
Thanks, Patty. And Susan, thank you for this question and the opportunity to talk about this really important issue, which I think shouldn't be left out of any conversation regarding infrastructure and clean energy and climate. And that issue being environmental justice. So I am quite familiar with the platform and paper you put forward. And there are so many of the core tenets that align exactly with the Vice President's agenda. This is something that the Vice President spoke to when he released his original climate plan, which is in fact, he termed his plan for a clean energy revolution and environmental justice. And then when the Vice President rolled out his Build Back Better plan, he released an entire paper just on environmental justice. It includes structural reforms in the government to make sure that environmental justice leaders, not just people from Washington, but people who actually live in environmental justice communities, have a seat at the table and a direct line to talk to the White House in order to make sure that we prioritize addressing environmental justice issues. It also includes creating a new division within the Justice Department solely focused on environmental justice issues, which will be a big change in addition to, once again, having a supported environmental and natural resources division at the Justice Department so we can take enforcement action against polluters who are disproportionately hurting particularly low-income communities and communities of color. It also includes a commitment that 40% of the benefits of Vice President Biden's infrastructure and clean energy package, that $2 trillion package, will go to communities that have been disproportionately impacted by pollution. So that will ensure that these communities don't just have an end to the environmental injustices, but really have a path forward and get their fair share of the recovery. Too often we find that communities of color are left out of recoveries, and Vice President Biden is committed to make sure that that isn't the case under his administration. So all of that was built on a consultation with environmental justice leaders and people with lived experience in environmental justice communities who we talked to and really helped inform the development of the Vice President's plan there.
Terrific, thank you. Okay, this one's from Matthew, and I hope I pronounced it right, Matthew Grokoff in Ann Arbor, Michigan, Haley, Congresswoman. So I think between you and Bob, this one's for you. How can investing in modernizing the electric grid help with social justice, energy equality, resilience, and job creation? I'm a real estate developer in Michigan and would like to create neighborhoods that are all electric and powered by renewable energy. However, many regulations create barriers for developers like me. What policies in the Democratic plan can help accelerate the transition to a resilient and renewable energy grid?
Yeah, we see this across a multitude of sectors, certainly with our recycling infrastructure as well. Every municipality seems to have their own standards, their own process, and so we end up with 10,000 different standards for the nation's recycling sector. I don't know how many we have for electric grid impediments, but my interest is entirely piqued based on this great question coming right from Ann Arbor. And I particularly appreciate it because it's a focus on equality. And when we look at the America that Joe Biden envisions, he's not looking at it based on the wealth of a neighborhood. He's looking at it based on the value of the people who live there and the value that all of them afford through their daily work and their contributions to society. So it really shouldn't matter what zip code you live in particular, based on what access to renewables or new technologies or improvements that get made. Certainly, this is also a cost issue, which I know Bob could likely get into, and I have to imagine like some of the energy providers here in Michigan, they are also taking a charge in terms of stepping up towards equality. And I'm really proud of this panel in part because we looked at our present reality and we also looked at our future. And if you all notice, we haven't dwelled at all on the 100-year global pandemic that has hit our country pretty hard, to say the least, and the vision that Joe Biden has to get us out of that. But the reason why I'm mentioning it is because we can still do all these things. We don't need to be held back. It continues to put pressure and energy on what we've lost sight of. Doug, we could have a whole separate side conversation on autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, and the proliferation of the new technologies. Certainly during a shutdown period, everyone's balance sheets from now to the end of time is always going to have this like Q2, Q3 blip in the year 2020 as a result of this pandemic. But it's the vision on moving forward and how we actually achieve that, which is why we're all so fired up and ready for Joe Biden and why I can't wait to serve with him as the next president of the United States. So, Bob, you have anything else you want to add into that? Because I know you could probably get into the details.
That is a tough act to follow. But let me talk about the fact that at our company, we have an obligation, as we should, to serve everyone. It's unusual at utilities. Unlike other companies, we don't choose our customers. We have an obligation to serve everyone, which we take very seriously. And as I started my comments with, reliability is essential for all of our customers. And we are increasingly working with developers on these kinds of smart solutions that I think the question is addressed toward, to provide a home that has the ability to use a battery, to integrate an electric vehicle, all of those kinds of things. It requires some upgrades to the grid, modernizing the grid, which we're very focused on at Dominion. We think we have the opportunity to take this machine that's more than 100 years old, the electric grid, and really bring it into the digital age. And I think that will help from a technology standpoint address some of those issues. But ultimately, I think it gets back to the kinds of conversations we've been having earlier. If we're all cooperating toward achieving the same kind of goal, I think we have a very good chance to get there.
Well, everyone, this is a little bit of a shame because we have a ton more questions coming in, but we unfortunately are running out of time, which means Business Forward is going to have to do a second panel at some point. But thank you all for your time and for what was a really, really interesting and forward-looking conversation. We appreciate it. Thank you, everyone who joined us out there in Zoom land. Thank you for your time and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.